So this is the new timing belt. I've never actually changed the timing belt on any vehicle, so this should be interesting. Since I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just going to start by tearing into it, start taking stuff off, and see if I can get down to the timing belt. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove this fan. I can do that by, as you can see right there, there's a bolt, and then there's two others. I believe I just need to undo those 4 bolts and it should come right off. So I got the fan off. It came off surprisingly easy. And I should probably mention on a project like this, you know, the parts are pretty cheap, but it's pretty labor intensive. You got to take off a lot of things to get in there to where the belt is. And so while you're in there, it's just worth taking the time to replace as many parts as you can. This fan is actually connected to the water pump. I'm going to be replacing that water pump. I'm going to be replacing some of the pulleys in there. I'm going to be replacing the other belts that go to the AC and the alternator, those things. And so anything else that while you're in there, if it looks worn, I would just replace it now, because you don't want to do all the work and then 2 weeks later you have your water pump go out and then you have to do it all again. So that's what it looks like with the fan off. So the next thing I think I'm going to do is to start taking those belts off, just trying to work my way down to that timing belt, which is at the front of the engine. It's basically behind this cover right here. So I'm gonna have to remove a lot of stuff to get to it. I'm gonna have to drain the radiator. Like I said, I haven't done this before, so should be interesting. All right, got the coolant starting to drain. It's a little bit of a slow trickle, but that's all right. So I loosened the power steering pump up, so I should be able to get this belt off. Okay, there we go. There's supposed to be a screw right where that hole is to adjust the tension with this pulley, but as you can tell, there's no screw there. So I'm just going to take this whole thing off. There's a bolt here and one right under here. Alright, so I got that off. I made a mistake. There wasn't just 2 bolts, there was one underneath as well. So there was 3 bolts, but once I got those off, it came right off. And I should be able to just pop that belt off. And then last is this belt that goes to the alternator. This pulley that's on the water pump is already loose, so I should be able to just pull that off when I get a second. I had to undo this coolant hose, and I still need to get the crank pulley off. But there's one thing that I forgot about that I need to do first. I need to set the engine to top dead center on the number 1 cylinder. So to set the distributor at top dead center for cylinder number 1, this is going to be the procedure. On the crank pulley, there's these little notches. There's also holes too, so make sure you're lining it up with the notches. The furthest one on the left there is at top dead center. And you can turn this clockwise if you hook a ratchet up to the bolt in the center there. I think it's a 22 millimeter. So you're going to want to align that notch with this pointer right here that pokes out. So right now it's lined up. But the trick is cylinder number 1 and cylinder number 6 are actually at top dead center at the same time. So to make sure that you have it correct, you're going to have to pop this distributor cap off. This is cylinder 1 right here. What you're going to want to do is open that up and see which cylinder the distributor is pointing at. Right now, if you were to put this back on, you could see that this is number 4 over there, so it's not on the right one. So I need to rotate this again, whoa, until it gets to number 1. Try that again here. And so you're probably going to want to make sure you do this before you take this crank pulley off. Otherwise, I don't know how you're going to turn it. So that looks pretty close right there. And if we pop this off, I believe it's pointing to the first one now, which is right here. So I think we should be good. Now I'm gonna keep tearing stuff apart. Alright, to help me get the crankshaft pulley off, I went and bought this from Harbor Freight, Earthquake XT. Alright, let's see what this thing can do. One win for Harbor Freight so far. As you can see, I got the harmonic balancer off there, and I'm working on this top cover for the timing belt. There's just a bunch of bolts that go around that hold it on. Got those off. And then there's also a lower cover also that I need to start working on. But so far everything has gone fairly smoothly. So as you can see, I was able to get both the covers off. The next step is just to make sure that you have everything lined up correctly. It may be difficult to see on here, but there's a little dot on the sprocket right there. And then there's a little bit of a dot right here, and you want those lined up. And it's the same on this side. It's a little harder to see with the hose, but there's a little dot right there. And then behind there, there's another little dot right there, and they're lined up pretty good. And then down at the bottom on the crankshaft pulley, but there's a dot, yeah, right there, and then there's a little notch right here. You want those lined up, and it looks like it's lined up pretty good. So as far as everything lining up, I think I'm good. But I'm going to go ahead and pull this water pump off before I put the new belt on. So I'll replace that, and then I'll start taking the belt off. The water pump itself should be fairly easy. It's just 6 bolts right there, and they just go around. I think I'll just pull those off, and I think it should come off pretty easy. So those bolts are coming off pretty easy. I'm just using this, and they're coming out nice and quick. Alright, this is the real test. See how difficult it is to get that thing out. So it took a few taps with the hammer, but the water pump came off. Now I just need to clean the gasket material off. So once I get that all cleaned off, I'll be ready to put the new water pump back on. So I think I got the mating surface pretty good. You can see on the outside where it's a little bit darker, that's where the gasket for the water pump will sit. This tool here is pretty nice for removing the gasket. Is just a little tool that holds a razor blade pretty steady. I'm going to be sticking the new water pump on, and the instructions that I'm following, what it says to do is to place some gasket maker, you know, some Permatex, something like this, basically on both sides of the gasket, bolt this on. Hopefully that'll make it so it doesn't leak. After I get the bolts on, they'll be torqued to 12 to 15 pounds. So we'll give this a shot, see how it goes. I don't want to make a huge mess. I'm usually pretty good at that, but let's get this already. Yes. So the new water pump is on. I just tightened the bolts until they were firm. I'm going to go ahead and let the gasket sealer dry for about an hour, and then I'll come back and torque it down. It says to let it sit for about 24 hours before you add any fluid to it. So in order to get the timing belt off the sprockets, there's this timing belt tensioner right here. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and remove that bolt right in the center. And once we get that off, we should be able to pull the timing belt right off. So I got the bolt off that tensioner pulley, and then there's a spot where you can insert an Allen wrench, and you just twist it like that, and that loosens the belt up enough that you can slide it off. I'll probably have to use 2 hands. I'll just pull that off, and then once I get the belt off, I'm going to go ahead and pull that tensioner pulley off. And be a little careful, there's that spring behind it. I'm going to be reusing that, and there may be a couple other pieces back there, so just make sure you don't drop them all over the place. So in order to install the timing belt correctly, I believe this is the procedure. As you can see, there's a white line there, and that matches up with this dot on this camshaft pulley. Then on this side, there's kind of this dotted line, and it matches up with the dot on that side. And then down here, there's another line, and it should line up with this dot here That one's going to be a little bit harder because I'm not going to be able to see it. Once I get that on, then I'll put the pulley on. I'm not sure what's easier, putting the belt on and then the pulley, or the pulley and then the belt. So I may have to play with it a little bit. So I got that tensioner on. It looks pretty good. I think everything's still lined up. I'm going to go ahead and turn the engine a couple times by hand here. Whoops, if I can get it on. So I went ahead and turned it around a few times by hand, and it sounded pretty good. It didn't sound like there was anything hitting. You do get a little resistance from the compression. I do have the spark plugs in. If you don't have the spark plugs in, you won't. If you are turning it and it feels like there's something that's binding, that could be the valves hitting the pistons, which you do not want. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to top dead center and start putting this back together. So I'm going to go ahead and fill the radiator up with water. I just want to make sure that this water pump isn't leaking around the gasket. I don't know if I did a very good job installing it, so I'd rather find out now and fix it versus get it all put back together and then find out. So I'm going to go ahead and hook this hose back up right here, and then I should be able to fill it up with water. I'll just probably have to pull that off again to get the covers back on. So I got some good and bad news. The good news is I didn't see any leaks out of the water pump, but the bad news is when I was putting the radiator plug back in, I broke it, and so now it's leaking out of the bottom of the radiator. So I think I found a solution to my broken plug that's in the radiator. This was the stock one here. As you can see, it just snapped off as I was tightening it. I was just tightening it by hand. I couldn't find one at the auto parts store, so what I ended up doing is I went to Home Depot. I found a bolt that had the same thread pattern. So the stock bolt, it's an M10 with a 1.25 thread pattern. And so I just bought a bolt like that, and I just cut it to length. So I'm going to pop it in there and see if that will hold water. So I put water in there. You can kind of see that. Probably got a few bubbles in the system, but mostly I just wanted to make sure that I don't have any leaks in my water pump, which I don't, and my homemade radiator plug's working, so that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and start putting this all back together. So I got the tightening covers back on. Now I need to get the crank pulley back on down there, or the harmonic balancer, whatever you want to call it. There is a specific torque number that you're supposed to tighten it to. That's kind of hard because the thing moves while you're trying to tighten it. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little bit of thread lock on the bolt that goes in there. I'm going to tighten it down to where all the belts line up straight. That's basically what I'm going for here. So I pretty much got this thing put back together. I need to top off the coolant one more time. I need to hook the battery back up. Then I'll probably try to start it, see if there's any issues there. After that, the plan is to just let it run for a few minutes, let it warm up, and see if I need to add more coolant. I'm guessing I probably will need to. Oh, I should note that there is supposed to be one more pulley, like right here, for the AC. I'm actually going to just leave that off because my AC does not work, and I think eventually I'm just going to take it all out. We'll try starting this thing up here. Well, she started up pretty uneventfully, and it's running, seems to be running pretty well. I'm going to let it run a little bit, check the coolant. So I've been driving the car around for the last couple weeks with the new timing belt, and the engine has not yet exploded or broke down or anything. So I think it was a success on the timing belt change. Hopefully this video was helpful. Please click my logo to subscribe to my channel for more car videos. And as always, like and share the video. Thanks.